Well, welcome back to Words with Friends. We're so glad that you could join us tonight. We're going to watch a really short clip on empathy. Our word for tonight is empathy. And this is from Brene Brown. I think you'll be blessed by this. Then we'll come right back and we'll have some discussion, a little bit of Bible study, and I hope it's a blessing for you. Watch this.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you can climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Well, welcome back. All right, I just want to hear from you guys. What did you hear? What was the best thing you heard from that video? Something that you'll take with you that stuck with you?
I loved the definition of empathy is feeling with people, because I think that is just, it's something we all struggle with, especially when someone has gone through something terrible, and we haven't experienced that type of pain. It's so hard that we go towards sympathy instead of empathy and just completely tear down the relationship.
Yeah, I think that I often try to keep things on the positive side. So kind of like the deer, but just like not as crass as like, well, at least this. I try to like feed some positive points of like how, like, what could you actually like, cheer up about? Like how could we keep this light when really it's because I don't want to dive into the deep hurt that they're in.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the toxic deer. If you're the toxic deer in the relationship, you need to ask some hard questions. You need a positive bear.
True.
And an empathetic bear.
Yeah.
And I did notice how often I will say to somebody that silver lining. I love that it's a verb. Well, look on the bright side. That's not empathy. That's not what we're striving for. I don't want to jump too much into the words tonight, but when we get to Hebrews and we talk about we have a high priest who's Jesus that sympathizes with us. That word broken down in Greek is to feel together, and that's the metaphor I want to use tonight of feeling together with somebody. Because if not, you're in these places, these dark places, alone. And so I want to talk about the ability to see pain in others, and I think she touched on this. That so often when we're going through these dark times, no matter what it is, and she really categorized some pretty tough times. It's just unseen. What do you think the danger is of people being unseen and unheard?
I think if the pain is never expressed, then you can't get through it.
Yeah.
Not fully. And if it's never heard by someone who can lovingly hear it and accept it and help you move through it, then you can get stuck in that place for a long time.
Well, and you're stuck by the idea of I'm the only one.
Yes.
There's no one else.
Yeah.
And as helpful as it is, or I guess I should say this, as we don't want to silver line things, it's also helpful to hear, yeah, I've gone through that too. Maybe not exactly. I know just what that's like because, you know, if somebody lost a child, you say, well, we had a favorite dog that died. And you don't want to do, that's not what we're talking about. But we're saying there are other people who experience this level of grief. And so you're not out there kind of isolated and alone. What else?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to the value of a person's feelings. I think when you try to jump around their feelings, what they kind of feel is, well, I'm not worth sympathy. I'm not worth, like, I don't deserve the sympathy because obviously I'm not getting it. And so maybe they feel like they feel like their pain is invalid.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should be trying to look on the brighter side. Maybe I'm, you know, we try to say you're digging yourself that hole. Well, it's like, well, sometimes you just need to sit in that for a little bit and not already extend the ladder. And just kind of like the video says, you could throw that ladder down, but and say get out, or you can throw the ladder down and you can crawl down with it.
Yeah, I don't need instructions as to how to get out of my situation as much as I need somebody to be present in my situation. That might lead to me, I mean, it eventually will. It does get better. I don't want to say there's no situation that you're just going to be down in this hole. But if somebody's present with me in that terrible, terrible time, then I'm going to make it. I can think of some times of deep grief, of deep trials, when somebody said to me, what can I do? We always ask that question, what can we do to help? And I literally said to somebody, I need you to come and be physically present. I don't want you to say anything. I just need you to stand near me. So remember to feel together, to feel alongside somebody else. These people that go unseen, who are the folks that you think in our society we don't think about their pain? Who are the folks that you and I'll give an example. Until I had some friends that really went through poverty, what it means to live in poverty, it was kind of a textbook issue. It was a very academic study. But until I knew somebody that went through that, I was like, I didn't see it. What about you guys? You have some people that you think are in pain or in suffering that go unseen. Who are those folks?
I think for me at least, when I think of unseen and I think emotionally unseen, I think of the people who go the most seen. So celebrities, people like that, when they deal with loss, you're like, well, you already have so much more else. Like, what is this pain compared to everything else you have in life?
Right.
So I think that those are the people that don't get the slack of empathy that most people think that they deserve.
When you hear how many are dealing with depression and anxiety, there was a kind of a spate of overdoses, but overdoses that were due to regular, what do you call it, prescribed medications, because they were trying to medicate a pain that on the outside you're going, well, you're beautiful, your wife is beautiful.
You have everything together.
Yeah, you've got everything, and yet something is very, very broken inside. Who else? Unseen.
For me, I think personally, my mom's cancer battle really put that just long-term illnesses into perspective, because at the beginning everyone is so helpful, everyone wants to be supportive, and I think of our friend Trey and Sarah, it's when it's years, when it goes on for such a long time, people get, I don't want to say tired of hearing about it, but they just forget. They forget that this is still ongoing, that this pain is still real, that it's still raw.
There's a very real term called compassion fatigue. And it happens to everybody, but it happens especially to people who are in the caregiving industry. So you hear so much of you spend so much time in it, you just have kind of a quotient that you fill up and you go, man, I'm just out of compassion for people. I want to use this story from Luke chapter 10. This is Luke 10. We'll start in verse 25. And it's a very familiar story. I'm not going to read the whole thing because you know the story of the Good Samaritan. But I want you to hear how it starts. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? "What is written in the law?" He replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, and so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" And then comes that story with the wonderful twist of a man who's traveling, who falls among robbers, who people come and ignore him. There's the priest, there's the Levite, there's all of these people who say, "I'm not interested," and then it's the Samaritan. But I want to start with the motivations. This guy is asking Jesus, what do you think as we're kind of looking into this man's heart, what's his motivation for asking this question?
I think he's looking for a gold star. He's looking for acknowledgement that he knows how to live his life according to God's plan. Like, he wants Jesus to be like, "You got it. Good job."
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's a very type 3 on the Enneagram. He wants somebody to say, "Yes, you're doing it well. You're on the right path. Don't change anything in your life." Like, if anything, people should be looking to you as the example.
I was trying to give this. I was trying to be empathetic, and I thought, what if this guy literally is trying to be right with God? When it says he wanted to justify himself, that sounds negative. It sounds what Leah said. Well, he's looking to make sure he's checked all the boxes. But what if he's actually seeking after the heart of God? And then Jesus answers this question, and he gives him it's the same thing with the rich young ruler. It's the same thing with so many people that ask him these hard questions. He gives a very hard answer. And so Jesus doesn't say, if you want to be saved, then do this. Mm-hmm. In fact, he turns the question back on him. Well, how do you read it? And then he tells this story. What about this story? What is Jesus driving at? Where's the salvation in the story of the Good Samaritan? Like, where is that idea of, here's the thing you must do to be saved?
Yeah, I think when he talks about the whole, who is my neighbor, I think that Jesus is saying, well, who do you say it is? Mm-hmm. Right? Well, that's not ask about my definition. Who do you say your neighbor is? Because that says a lot about who you are as a person, and are you really following me?
So he's at every turn he's turning the question back to the man.
Yeah, and then he does that all the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So where is salvation found in the story of a guy who takes care of a guy who got beat up?
I think in the background of Samaritans as a whole. I think the way people viewed them, that they were lower than low, that you didn't think highly of Samaritans, and the fact that a person that was considered to be so low would do something for someone else and go above and beyond to make sure they were taken care of, that is how you love your neighbor. A person that you have no reason to love, you have no reason to look after, that shows your character, and it shows God's love for all of us.
Jesus points him back to a people group that would have been largely unseen. They wouldn't even been regarded. They wouldn't even been kind of like when they're choosing the king, and Samuel goes to get the new king, and they bring out all the sons, but they don't even consider to bring David. Samaritans are not even invited to the party. They're not even chosen. They're not even on the guest list. And Jesus is driving this man's heart back to, who do you see as worthy of helping, as worthy of salvation? And I think what he's really causing this man to do is understand that in the story, we always say what? In the story, you need to be the Good Samaritan. Mm-hmm. No. We're not the Good Samaritan in the story.
Right.
We're the guy in the ditch.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
We're the one who needs the help.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's this understanding of compassion. He says after the man responds, the guy that was, well, he says, and who was this? I think this is interesting. He says, and who was the neighbor? And do you remember the response? The guy won't even say Samaritan, right?
It's a good guy.
He's like,
the merciful one.
That one guy that did the thing. And Jesus says, you answered correctly. Go and be like that person. He says there's something in the compassion of this Samaritan that we need to learn from. And I mentioned it earlier. We're close. We're rounding third base here as we're finishing out tonight. But I want you to hear Hebrews 4. and we're going to tie this together with this idea of sympathy and compassion and empathy. But Luke, read for us Hebrews 4:14 through 16.
Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so we may receive mercy to find grace to help us in our time of need.
Okay, so what do we get from that? We've got this high priest who's able to, the word empathize, in some translations sympathize, to feel together, to feel alongside. How is Jesus able to empathize, Leah?
Because he's been through everything and more. I mean, just imagining, I was reading The Last Supper last night, and just imagining him knowing the pain he would go through and doing it not only willingly, but because of his love for us, because he didn't want us to have to go through that pain. And so he's felt all of that pain, all of the grief, everything we've ever gone through. He has felt and wants to share it with us.
He's felt it, but you made a comment, this was yesterday when we were discussing this. You said sympathy or empathy is not just feeling.
Right.
That there's no time when you hear about Jesus being compassionate. In fact, if you go back and you kind of chase the word, the times when you see Jesus's heart is moved, it's moved to action.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
In fact, in two very famous places, his heart's moved so much that he brings people back from the dead. But that word compassion there, you'll find it in a couple other places, and that Jesus is so moved. He's moved by people's faith. He's moved by the lady who comes and touches his garment. He's moved by the centurion who says, you just say the word. But, sympathy is to say, I really hate that for you. Mm-hmm. Empathy is to say, I'm showing up tomorrow to wash your clothes so that you can take a nap. I'm going to go sit with you while you make funeral arrangements. Mm-hmm. Empathy always moves. Empathy, what did we say? A couple of weeks ago, I think we said edification is love with an address. Well, empathy is an action verb. Like you can't feel it and not do it. Anything else you want to add to that, Luke, about Jesus as one who can empathize?
Yeah, I think we just talk about relationships. I mean, Jesus went through every single kind of relationship you can think of besides like a marital one. Right. Mm-hmm. But even that he spoke into so well. But when we think about betrayal of friends, when we think of starting new relationships, when we think of seeing people for their pain and not for what society tells them that they are, all this different things that we can say, okay, well, maybe I need to be more like that Jesus, because we talk about often that, he emphasizes our pain because of the cross and the love. But then you got to look at, Jesus when he goes, pulls Peter aside and goes, feed my sheep, right? Yeah. Like, that kind of heart-to-heart conversation that sometimes we also need to have with our friends in relationship. Mm-hmm. But we go, man, that's not a relationship. That's not a conversation I want to have. Because, where does it say in Scripture, I got to have these tough conversations? And it's like, well, look what
right
Jesus
there.
does.
Look what Jesus does, yeah. Okay, so here's what I want to ask you to do here. Maybe 3 questions to talk about at home. 1, where have you seen this? Where have you seen somebody that had compassion, that was empathetic, and remembering that that's not just a feeling, but it's moving into the neighborhood, mm-hmm. not just saying, boy, somebody should do something mm-hmm. about that.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between trying to fix? This is a hard one to learn for men, mm-hmm. Luke. We're not supposed to fix. Instead of trying to fix it, to suffer with.
Yeah.
To suffer alongside. To say, maybe those two kind of blend together. And then I want you to just kind of brainstorm some things that you can do. What can you do to comfort somebody who's in need? Don't be the judgmental deer. Be the bear that goes down in the hole. And I want to end, I love this story. This is from a friend of mine, a preacher named Rick Brown. And I'm just going to read this, let it be a blessing to you, and then we'll be done tonight. She was sitting about 5 feet to my right, dark skin, maybe 10 years old. She was wearing a white dress, a ribbon in her hair, and no shoes on her feet. She had no shoes on her feet, but she had a Bible in her lap. She caressed it like it was a prized gift. I wanted to ask her about her, but couldn't because of the barrier between us. She was Haitian, and I was American, and neither of us spoke the other's language. But apparently we both spoke Bible, so I stole a few glances to see if I could tell where she was reading. This is his wife. Karen and I had taken a group of teenagers to Haiti for a week of working in a clinic, building a water well, and inviting people to a meeting at the church at night. She had come dressed in probably the best dress she had to wear, and she brought her Bible. As the interpreter translated our friend Reg Cox's message, I wasn't listening. I had heard Reg before, but had not seen this girl before. And after a few glances, I could tell she had her Bible open to the Psalms. Even in her language, I could tell it was the Psalms by the way the script was laid out on the pages. She had turned to Psalm 34. I opened my English version and read this verse in Psalm 34, verse 18. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. I can't prove to you she was focused on that verse. She left before I could get the interpreter to help me visit with her, but I like to think that that verse was special to her. It's become special to me after seeing poverty at a level I had not experienced. My heartbeat's rhythm had been altered. I wasn't unlike many who think that those who are making it well in life financially, relationally, and professionally are the ones God must be most pleased with. But I learned that day that although he loves those people, he's near to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. If we want to be near to God, it equates that we need to be near to the brokenhearted too. I'm going to read that again. If we want to be near to God, it equates that we need to be near to the brokenhearted too. We need to sit with those who are crushed in spirit, but we don't often move in that direction, do we? We have enough of our own plates, enough worries of our own. Didn't even Jesus say not to worry about tomorrow because tomorrow has enough worries of its own? It's not easy to look at our own problems, much less those of others. The leather-skinned face of the sign holder at the intersection, the scared eyes of the orphan in the war zone, or a child in a poverty-stricken country that has little to eat and less to hope for. It's easier to escape into the beautiful world of the rich and famous or merely look away. But followers of Jesus can't. We believe God calls all Christians to show compassion to people in need. We believe that because Jesus demonstrated it. I hope tonight's been a blessing to you. Tune in next week for we're gonna bring empathy and what was our vulnerability. We're gonna combine those two next week in a way that I think is gonna be exciting. God bless.